Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene files a complaint against Fani Willis in a push for an investigation, suspension, and also disbarment of the Fulton County District Attorney. That complaint alleges Willis is corrupt, adding she should have been removed after lavish vacations with Nathan Wade were revealed. Greene's complaint follows Judge Scott McAfee's decision allowing Willis to remain on the case as long as Wade removed himself. Meantime, Trump maintains the cases against him are an effort to derail his presidential campaign. Judge Arthur Engoron imposes a monitor to oversee the finances at the Trump Organization. Engoron forcing the company to open its books to former Judge Barbara Jones starting on Thursday. The organization must notify Jones of any large cash transfers and the creation or end of assets, the restructuring of debt, and any efforts to secure surety bonds. This is part of the New York civil suit ruling and is a step toward New York Attorney General seizing Trump assets in order to pay his unprecedented near $500 million bond. Meantime, Trump attorney Alina Habba has not commented on Trump's strategy to secure the money amid rumors the 45th president is looking abroad.
The Letitia James crusade against Donald Trump is disgusting and is a threat to every American.
And former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy calls for New York Attorney General Letitia James to be disbarred. On X Thursday, the Trump surrogate slammed the Democrat for imposing excessive fines on the 45th president in an attempt to bankrupt him. He said that it's un-American to dictate hundreds of millions of dollars be paid in fines, all in order to receive an appeal, and called for the Supreme Court to step in.
This is an opportunity for the Supreme Court to step in and say, no, we're not going to stand for this kind of lawfare. Whether it's against Donald Trump or a Democrat, it's wrong. We don't want to empower prosecutors to be able to use bond and bail or bonds as a way of effectively achieving a goal that they couldn't achieve through the front door, which is bankrupting an opponent, even stopping them from being able to appeal those decisions.
And Ramaswamy said he expects even left-leaning members of the court to side with the 8 Amendments clause banning such excessive punishments. A new Texas law allowing police to arrest people suspected of illegally crossing the southern border was stopped from going into effect Tuesday night. One America's Daniel Baldwin has more.
Senate Bill 4 has become the subject of the battle between the state of Texas and the federal government over control of immigration law. Wednesday, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments over whether to temporarily halt the law that allows state and local officials to arrest migrants who cross into the state of Texas illegally. The hearing came one day after the U.S. Supreme Court denied an emergency stay request from the Biden administration to block the law. Hours later, the appellate court reinstated the hold. I want to bring in Matt Crapo, attorney for the Immigration Reform Law Institute. Matt, it's certainly a confusing timeline. Can you just lay out where we stand with everything right now so our audience has a clear grasp of it?
Well, where we stand right now is the Fifth Circuit has revoked their stay, so the law is blocked by the district court's injunction for now. They, like you mentioned, they did have an argument yesterday morning. There's a possibility that the Fifth Circuit at any time could let all or some portion of the law go into effect pending appeal. Now, the Fifth Circuit's already expedited briefing in this case, so they're only a couple of weeks from hearing arguments on the main appeal. So who knows? The Fifth Circuit could allow some of it to go into effect, or they could just let it stay on hold, not go into effect until they hear the final arguments in 2 weeks.
Well, the big question, of course, that everybody's wondering, is this law, Senate Bill 4, legal? Is it constitutional? Sir, you're an attorney. Can you also give us some insight into that big overarching question?
Well, our argument that it is legal is kind of novel. We tried to distinguish the Supreme Court decision in Arizona versus United States, a 2012 decision that said that, the states, immigration is generally a federal prerogative to enforce immigration laws. The states can't do too much in that area, at least as far as it goes to removals and arrests and that type of thing. But what distinguishes the Texas case from the Arizona case is that Texas has invoked its right to self-defense under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, that says that states can engage in war even without the consent of Congress if they're actually invaded. Now, Governor Abbott has declared an invasion. We made the argument that the cartels and the way they use the flow of illegal immigrations across the border is actually an invasion. Governor Abbott reasonably concluded that it was an invasion, and the court shouldn't be involved in deciding whether or not it's an invasion. So we argue that the court should say that it's not up to us to declare whether or not it is an invasion. Governor Abbott's done it, that he's done it in good faith.
You talked about the court staying out of declaring it an invasion. It's interesting. Thursday, videos emerged of migrants breaching wire, this concertina wire in El Paso, and then they made a rush for the border wall in El Paso. So in light of events like this, things, millions of migrants coming across a day, how important is it for a state like Texas to have the sovereign ability to enact a law like SB 4 and arrest migrants they suspect of being illegal?
I think it's critical, especially where you have the current administration and DHS has absolutely abdicated any type of effort to control the border, secure the border, or enforce the immigration laws that Congress has passed. Congress sets the policy. Congress's policy is that DHS should have operational control of the border. There should not be any illegal entry, and it's chaos. And it's the states retain their sovereign right to defend themselves. It's a self-defense measure, and as you say, there's been millions of people come across the border in the last 2 or 3 years. So I think it's critical for a state to have that right, and they've invoked that right. And I think that changes the calculus in whether or not, it's up to the federal government to enforce immigration law, but they've abdicated their role. And if they won't do it, the state should have the right to do it. And we argue that they do under the Constitution.
Very, very well said, Matt Crapo. Thank you so much for joining us here on One American News. We appreciate your insight and your time. Thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene holds a hearing about the dark side of the abortion industry, and we want to warn our viewers, much of the following story is graphic in nature.
They are covering this up and hiding it. And for the obvious reasons, if people really knew, really understood what an abortion really is.
Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene holds a hearing investigating the black market of baby organ harvesting. She invited every Democrat on the Oversight Committee earlier this week, including outspoken pro-abortion members Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib. However, they were a no-show.
None of them were willing to show up in spite of the fact they constantly want to talk about so-called women's reproductive rights, which is abortion. I think this is such an important issue to engage on. But if we're going to talk about it, we have to really talk about exactly what it is. In the most worst, goriest detail, because that's what it is. It truly is gory, horrific, barbaric, but apparently very lucrative. And I think that's the most disturbing side of it, other than it kills a human being.
And that is exactly what she did, describing in detail the various methods of abortion. There were no flowery terms like procedure or termination to mask the gruesome reality.
While the baby is still alive, the abortionist inserts a suction catheter, which is 10 to 20 times more powerful than a household vacuum. A curette, which is a long-handled curved blade, is then inserted to scrape the lining of the uterus to ensure there are no remaining body parts.
Working undercover, investigative reporter David Daleiden rubbed elbows with top abortionists and Planned Parenthood executives.
I consumed far more alcoholic beverages with abortion providers than my liver would like to admit, as they talked about the harvesting and sale of aborted baby livers. Sometimes I actually saw them start to tear up, describing the tiny brains and hearts and feet of premature babies that they dismember and brutalize before selling them.
He shared his undercover videos of Planned Parenthood employees talking about selling baby body parts for research.
What would you expect for intact tissue? What sort of compensation? What sort of...
Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying? I want a Lamborghini. I want a Lamborghini.
Because that's how we're going to keep you happy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
To make sure that financially
Yes.
you're growing your clinic and however you need to say that, frame it on the other end.
Yes. If we alter our process and we are able to obtain intact fetal cadavers, it's all just a matter of line items.
Intact organs and body parts are more valuable to buyers, who, by the way, are primarily taxpayer-funded researchers. However, partial birth abortions are prohibited by law. That means if the baby's head is outside the body of the mother, or in the case of a breech, any part past the belly button. But abortionists have found a way around the law.
If they're afraid that it's getting too close to an obvious partial birth abortion situation, that the doctor will take one set of forceps, hold the body of the 4 or 5 or 6 month old baby at the woman's cervix, and then use a second set of forceps to pull off a leg or two from the fetus, and then allow the rest of the baby to be delivered.
In 2022, the federal government reportedly spent $57 million on fetal tissue research. This involves experiments like the one at the University of Pittsburgh, completely funded by the National Institutes of Health.
Recent government-sponsored experiments on aborted baby parts involve stitching the scalps of 5-month-old aborted babies onto lab rats to keep the baby hair growing on the rodents.
2 weeks ago, Dalyden's investigations exposed a Planned Parenthood contract, potentially worth millions, giving the University of California, San Diego access to fetal and placental tissue.
Whatever the total amount of the sales, this contract is irrefutable proof of Planned Parenthood's criminal mens rea to sell aborted baby body parts in violation of federal law.
But the cover-up for aborted baby organ harvesting goes all the way to the top, as then California Attorney General Kamala Harris tried to keep a lid on Dalyden's reporting.
The ongoing cover-up goes to the highest levels of our government. Kamala Harris, as the Planned Parenthood-endorsed Attorney General of California in 2016, raided my apartment to seize hundreds of hours of unreleased undercover footage.
For one Planned Parenthood whistleblower, abortion is not a political left or right issue.
This is genocide. This is something that we all need to oppose.
Well, still to come on One America News, the manhunt for an escaped Idaho convict and his accomplice comes to an end. How they were captured, plus a hot air balloon in Rochester, Minnesota crashes after colliding with a power line. How the airborne joyride turned into a nightmare. After this. And welcome back to One America News. I'm Lindsey Adams. The Bill and Hillary Clinton airport executive whose home was raided by the ATF succumbs to his injuries. And the Little Rock Municipal Airport Commission chairman mourning Brian Malinowski's death in a statement on Thursday, thanking him for his 16 years of service. ATF agents raided Malinowski's home at 6 a.m. Pacific time Tuesday, shooting him in the head. Malinowski's brother has called the whole situation suspicious, asking why the top executive was not just apprehended at work or why an entire team was dispatched to his residence. The U.S. Attorney's Office has declined to unseal documents related to the search warrant executed against Malinowski, and Malinowski had met with lawmakers in Washington days prior to the incident. Well, the two-day manhunt for escaped Idaho inmate Skylar Meade and his accomplice comes to an end. Both suspects were arrested on Thursday following a short pursuit in Twin Falls County. Additionally, police are investigating if the pair are connected to two homicides discovered Wednesday night after handcuffs believed to have been worn by Meade were found at one of those crime scenes.
There was a short vehicle pursuit, and both suspects were taken into custody separately. There were no shots fired or extensive use of force in this operation, for which we are thankful.
Meantime, Meade is being held without bond while he waits for an arraignment on an arrest warrant issued in Ada County. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs a bill into law which will address the statewide homelessness issue. One America's McKenna Blackman has more.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs House Bill 1365 into effect in order to address the homeless issue in Miami Beach and across the state. DeSantis was joined on Wednesday by Miami Beach Mayor Stephen Minor, State Representative Sam Garrison, and State Senator Jonathan Martin. The new law will require all camps to be removed from streets and public property, including moving homeless individuals into shelters and government encampments.
We have to govern this state and our communities with an eye towards what's in the best interest of the law-abiding citizen, what's in the best interest of families who are trying to raise kids, what's in the best interest of our seniors who are here to retire. That's what it's got to be. And too often, it's like people in other states and other cities around that are not doing well, it's like they let the inmates run the asylum. That doesn't work.
HB 1365 not only requires camps and such persons to be removed, but it would also allow law enforcement to take immediate action if one does not comply. Those in support of the bill say it will significantly lessen the nuisance of homeless living in public spaces, such as parks where young children are most commonly seen.
So implementing this type of legislation regarding the homeless is so necessary for our residents, for our businesses, to make sure that our streets are clean and that they're safe. Public spaces are for the public. We always have to remember, it seems obvious, but sometimes that gets lost.
Opponents of HB 1365 say it does not effectively address the homeless issue. Rather, it simply hides such persons from the public eye. This bill also comes as Miami Beach passed similar legislation last year, allowing law enforcement to arrest those who refuse to move to a shelter. Florida's new bill will go into effect October 1st. McKenna Blackman, One America News.
Well, network outages are taking place at the Department of Motor Vehicle offices around the nation, and DMV officials reported the outages on Thursday and stated database issues are likely the cause. Those needing to use DMV services are urged to utilize the department's website or call ahead of time before making an in-person visit. Officials are still unsure when the network will be fully restored. Well, high winds caused a hot air balloon to crash near a major highway in Rochester, Minnesota. And video footage released Thursday show the balloon catching fire after colliding with a power line. And additionally, the balloon's basket detached and fell to the ground, creating a small brush fire, which was quickly extinguished by fire crews. Meantime, 3 passengers riding on the vessel were able to escape without suffering any serious injuries. Well, the latest World Happiness Report comes out and America drops out of the top 20. Here's more on why young Americans are sinking that score.
The green light of the American dream is flickering, say young Americans. According to the 2024 World Happiness Report from Gallup, America was the 62nd happiest country to live in, according to young Americans, kicking the U.S. from the top 20 happiest countries in the world. Above the U.S. is Saudi Arabia and Guatemala, the latter being a country where political upheaval is forcing residents to flee to Mexico or the unhappy America. Meanwhile, at the top are countries like Finland and Denmark, countries that had to sign defense agreements with the U.S. amid fears that Russia's war with Ukraine would spark into a wider conflict around Europe. Reports have pointed out the cost of living in America is skyrocketing. Getting married costs around $36,000. Having a kid costs around $6,000 just when they come out. And raising the kid until they're 18 years old costs over $500,000. Raising a family, having health insurance, and buying homes, cars, and pets all adds up to nearly $3.5 million over a lifetime. Meanwhile, Americans make $1 million less on average. And over the past 4 years, costs have skyrocketed amid Bidenomics, and young people are feeling it.
I think because of how expensive it is to live now, and a lot of people depend on like their financial situation to make them happy. And it's the struggle when you don't have the financial stability to like live. So I think that's why, because it's hard out here.
Yeah.
But
especially living in New York, it's very expensive, high taxes, you know, work almost every day out of the week.
Miami's expensive too. Everyone's expensive now.
Other reports note younger generations are reporting more feelings of anxiety, depression, and loneliness that were exacerbated by the COVID-19 propaganda and lockdowns. Meanwhile, the political climate is pushing youngsters away from corrupt corporate media and onto independent outlets and social media sites like TikTok. The divisive and polarized political climate is also driving some out of the country.
You know, when I graduated high school, I originally just wanted to leave the United States. I wanted to go to Germany. Just like the political climate here, not just political climate, but also just the climate that we have in the United States is just not something that I think is healthy for a lot of us. I mean, a lot of us have to think about student debt in order to go to college, where in comparison to, you know, countries like Germany or Poland.
The Gallup report revealed the countries that grew their happiness scores were former communist countries turned democracies. And some studies have shown Gen Zers have been inspired by books and popular entertainment about younger generations rising up against oppressive governments. Some Gen Zers suggested they've been prepped for revolution since middle school. So maybe there's hope that younger generations could change the censorship, corruption, and hate-mongering seen from the U.S. government and its media allies and restore America's place as one of the world's happiest countries.
And still to come on One American News, Somali pirates are back at it again after decades of dormancy. How this is impacting global shipping companies. And officials in Sweden expect some unrest at this year's Eurovision event. How the organizers are trying to stay non-political amid the Gaza conflict just ahead. Welcome back to One America News. I'm Lindsey Adams. Officials in Sweden say they are expecting both visitors and protesters at this year's Eurovision event. Olivia Zolino has more.
In the lead up to this year's Eurovision Song Contest in May, host city Malmö is preparing for guests from 80 countries and possible unrest on the sidelines. The annual music competition is the world's biggest of its kind. While it bills itself as a non-political event, the global political backdrop often weighs. This year, the European Broadcasting Union, which organizes the contest, has resisted calls for Israel to be excluded amid its offensive in Gaza. In recent months, cultural events across Europe have been affected by protests and boycotts over the war. Malmö's Director of Sustainability and Safety, Per-Erik Ebbestad.
Det här är ju delar som vi naturligtvis tar hänsyn till och planerar.
It is very, very important to have the opportunity to be able to arrange this type of arrangement that really manifests and emphasizes the need for meetings and kinship across different countries and different opinions.
He added that though there's no direct threat to Eurovision at the moment, things could change. Israel's submission was revised after organizers took issue with their lyrics, which appear to refer to the October 7 Hamas attack. Malmö's mayor said her city stands behind the right to free speech and, while acknowledging the risks of non-peaceful protests, said she had confidence in the city's police force. Eurovision is set to begin May 7.
Well, a recent resurgence of piracy off the coast of Somalia is increasing costs of global shipping companies already grappling with Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. David Doyle has more.
A distress signal and a call to an emergency hotline couldn't save the Abdullah from Somali pirates. The Bangladeshi-owned bulk carrier was boarded last week, the latest victim of a resurgence in Somali piracy that international navies thought they had previously brought under control. A week later, and the Abdullah is anchored off Somalia. Speaking by telephone from a coastal area of the semi-autonomous Puntland region, one pirate financier, who goes by the alias Ismail Issei, said international navies had reduced their operations off Somalia. That's as, several hundred nautical miles to the north, Houthi militants have been launching repeated drone and missile strikes on international shipping in the Red Sea region since mid-November. Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud said that distraction was encouraging piracy. For nearly a decade, joint international operations had kept piracy dormant in waters that include some of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Instigators were thought to have largely become inactive. Mohamud says the answer is to boost Somalia's own law enforcement capabilities, both on land and in the sea. Its Coast Guard, according to government data, has only one functioning boat. The capital Mogadishu, the breakaway Somaliland region, and Puntland also have their own maritime police forces with limited resources. At their peak in 2011, Somali pirates launched 237 attacks and held hundreds of hostages, according to the International Maritime Bureau. That year, the Oceans Beyond Piracy Monitoring Group estimated their activities cost the global economy about $7 billion, including hundreds of millions in ransoms. The current rate of attacks is significantly less. According to data from the EU's anti-piracy mission, EU NAVFOR Atalanta, at least 2 cargo ships and 12 fishing vessels have been successfully seized since November. Over the weekend, the Indian Navy intercepted and freed another bulk carrier after it ventured back out to sea.
And still to come on One America News, Chris Christie may have dropped out of the GOP race for president, but he might not be out of the broader general election. How he left the door open for a run with no labels. And Republicans on the Senate Finance Committee grilled Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen about President Biden's budget proposal for the 2025 fiscal year. How she tried to defend his economic policies. Just ahead. America News, I'm Lindsey Adams. The CEO of American Airlines, United Airlines, Visa, and MasterCard will not testify at an upcoming U.S. Senate hearing on credit card competitions. That's all according to the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee Thursday. And this comes after Illinois Senator Dick Durbin in February had invited the executives of firms pushing back on his legislation to bring down fees charged by credit card companies requiring competition. Airlines argue the bill could force them to stop offering rewards by credit card companies, giving consumers frequent flyer miles. Meantime, Durbin's office says he has no plans to cancel the hearing. Well, two senators introduce a bipartisan bill to prevent exports of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to U.S. adversaries. Senators Joni Ernst and John Fetterman introduced the Banning Oil Exports to Foreign Adversaries Act on Thursday that specifically bans sales of oil to China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Syria, Cuba, and any entity controlled or influenced by China. The senators noted how foreign companies with direct ties to U.S. adversaries have previously won public auctions of excess crude oil from the Department of Energy. Ernst and Fetterman say it is essential to safeguard our strategic supply of oil from benefiting our enemies in order to protect national security. Senate Republicans spar with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen over President Biden's budget proposal. Take a look.
Sparks fly as Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen attempts to defend President Biden's budget proposal for the 2025 fiscal year. Speaking in front of the Senate Finance Committee Thursday, Yellen was placed on the back foot as Senate Republicans questioned her about the sprawling $7.3 trillion budget request made by the White House. This budget would raise the minimum corporate tax to 21% and the income tax rate for corporations to 28%. Additionally, Americans with a net worth of $100 million or higher will see a 25% tax increase. Republicans immediately came out against the budget, saying it will only feed the Biden administration's habit of recklessly spending at the expense of the American taxpayer. However, this does not seem to bother Yellen, who said Biden does not have an economic plan, but instead has principles.
The president doesn't have a plan. He has principles. He wants to work with Congress to find a way to protect Social Security and extend its solvency beyond 2034. Now, if the president wishes to...
But GOP members of the Finance Committee took issue with her statements, saying Biden has refused to work with Republicans on policy issues and instead seems more content with demonizing them.
He has not worked with us at all. On this Senate Finance Committee, we have not heard, at least I haven't, and I've been very active in this issue, we've not heard from the president one peep except to hear demagoguery rhetoric yelled at us on State of the Union addresses as regards social.
They pushed further, saying Biden has failed to keep his promise of not raising taxes on people making less than $400,000 annually. The Republicans in attendance pointed to inflation, which dropped to 3.2% year over year in February. This is down from its 9.1% peak from June of last year, but is still above the Fed's goal of 2%.
But the truth is, this administration has already broken that promise. Inflation is a tax on all Americans. High interest rates have kept families from buying homes and hindered the growth of small businesses. And now President Biden is choosing to let the Tax Cut and Jobs Act expire and to increase the corporate tax rate, forcing American families and workers to bear the cost of these woke policies.
Meantime, a recent CBS News poll found over 61% of Americans are disapproving of Biden's handling of the economy.
Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie does not rule out running against both Joe Biden and Donald Trump with centrist political group No Labels. In an interview with a former Obama advisor Thursday, Christie left the door open for the possibility, saying he wouldn't preclude anything at this point, and there were a number of hurdles he would have to clear before even considering a run while he was still in the Republican race. Christie previously called the group a fool's errand. The former governor later said if there was ever a time a third-party candidate could make a difference, it is now, but the question of what kind remains to be seen. Embattled New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez announces he will be running in the November election, but not as a Democrat. In a video released Thursday, the senator said that he was hopeful his corruption trial in the summer would result in an exoneration, and he would then run as an independent Democrat to keep his seat. Menendez and his wife are facing federal charges of corruption on behalf of the Egyptian government, and he has given up his committee positions but remains adamant of his innocence.
I am hopeful that my exoneration will take place this summer and allow me to pursue my candidacy as an independent Democrat in the general election. This would allow me the time to not only remind New Jerseyans of how I've succeeded in being your champion.
Menendez has been in the Senate since 2006, and his possible candidacy could make the general election a three-way race, possibly giving Republicans an opportunity to pick up the seat. Well, there are growing reports of cyber attacks hitting water systems throughout our country, with the Biden administration warning that these facilities must start improving their defenses. One America's Monica Page has more.
Jake Sullivan sent this letter to all governors this past week, warning them of, quote, disabling cyber attacks striking water and wastewater systems throughout the country. This warning comes as tensions have been increasing and military conflicts continue rising. Behind the threat are hackers from China and Iran. They've been posing continuous threats, but now the Biden administration is calling on state and local officials to work with the president to counter them. And I'm joined by national security expert and founder and president of Lopez Liberty LLC, Claire Lopez. Thank you so much for joining us here, Claire.
Thanks for having me.
So I first want to start off right off the bat here. What is the main goal of these Iranian and these Chinese hackers? And if they're looking to disrupt our water supply, what would that look like for the everyday American?
Well, the purpose of them doing this is obviously to cause chaos in America, to break down and even disrupt our supply of clean and safe drinking water. The water system, though, is just one of many. It's maybe 17 or so, 18 critical infrastructure elements of our society. Water is just one of those.
Why aren't our water supply systems as protected as some of these other infrastructure systems?
Well, I'm not sure all of them, the other ones are either. Other ones would include oil and gas. It would mean financial services, transportation, and so forth. I'm not sure all of those are adequately protected either. It's not that the water system is less protected than those other ones are, but that perhaps from a cyber perspective, that we need to be taking, as the National Security Advisor said, more steps. And this would be at the state level. He sent this letter to the governors. At that state and local level, that is where the steps for protection, cyber protection, need to be taking place. And, you know, they just, for whatever reason, cost, difficulty, they haven't done it.
And Claire, the people behind these attacks, they're seemingly from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They've suspected to have previously targeted and disabled common operational technology by just changing a default manufacturer password. Back in late November, these same Iranian-backed hackers actually attacked Israeli-made digital controls used in water and wastewater facilities here in the United States. But fortunately, it didn't affect the water supply. But, I mean, as harmless as it seems to just change a password, what does this say about their capabilities, and what is, you know, the standard procedure for preventing these types of attacks?
We think of ourselves, and I'm certain that Israel as well, you know, as having a very high standard of cyber protection. But that the Iranians, the IRGC, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of the Iranian regime, that it's been able to penetrate these critical infrastructures in the United States, in other countries, and perhaps even, if the claims are true, Israel's Dimona nuclear facility, that's a very high level of cyber expertise. And we need to take note of this, and we need to up our game in terms of protection.
And Claire, before we go, let's say these attacks actually come to fruition and they actually start to be carried out, where we start noticing, could this be the tip of the iceberg, really, for our national security?
Well, I mean, it certainly could be, and we should take this seriously. Don't mean to, you know, spread, widespread panic at this point. You know, ordinary folks, ordinary families should take the precautions that they would at any point in time. Mm-hmm. You know, have a supply of water on hand, of food stocked, have backup plans for communication with members of your family. Have backup plans for where you might need to go if you need to leave a certain area. These kinds of things are just, everyday precautions that any family should take. So I don't mean to, and I don't think that National Security Advisor Sullivan meant to instill, panic across the country, but this is serious. And the fact that this is now public, that this warning's been sent out to the governors, means that the threat is real, and we need to take it seriously.
Yeah, the threat is very real, and it certainly is concerning. National security expert and founder and president of Lopez Liberty, LLC, Claire Lopez, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Representative James Comer says he's aiming for accountability for the Biden family by extending invitations to Jim and Joe Biden to appear before the Oversight Committee. One America's John Hines has more now from Capitol Hill.
We are here with Chairman Jamie Comer. He is chairman of the House Oversight Committee, conducting an impeachment inquiry into the president and his connection with his son's business affairs. And, sir, you had a hearing with two witnesses, Jason Galanis and Tony Bobulinski. Both are former associates with Hunter Biden. And I thought it was kind of interesting in your statement. You came out with guns blazing and you said the Bidens sold Joe Biden around the world to enrich the Biden family. You described how Biden acted as the closer by dining, attending meetings, speaking on speakerphone, and having coffee with his son's foreign business associates as they funneled millions to the Biden family. And you also made 2 points. You said that either Joe Biden was complicit or he was incompetent, and that the Biden family was not working in any conventional sense of the word as a consultant, lawyers, or anything else. In this hearing, did you see evidence that would lead people to believe there's a predicate for impeaching Joe Biden?
I think so. I mean, a bribe. What did the Biden family do to receive $28 million? They didn't provide any service. They didn't sell any product. They weren't manufacturing anything. They're not registered lobbyists. They were selling access to Joe Biden. Now, if you read the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, it constitutes what's a bribe. A bribe can go to a family member, an immediate family member, and that's what they're getting Menendez on. If you look at the charges against Menendez, the question is, how do we hold this family accountable? We've proven today the Bidens were influence peddling. We've proven that for a long time. The Democrats never disputed that the Bidens were influence peddling. They never disputed the $24 million we said that they took in. They never disputed the fact that we said they didn't have a legitimate business. Their business was selling access to Joe. What they disputed was whether or not we could prove Joe did anything wrong. I want accountability for this family. And what we're going to talk about in the next coming days, Jim Jordan and I, along with, hopefully we'll get a meeting with Mike Johnson, and we're going to talk about how do we hold this family accountable. I believe criminal referrals to the Department of Justice is the best way. There are people on our committee that believe impeaching Joe Biden is the best way to hold him accountable, that it's more of a messaging statement because they know the Senate's not going to do anything. I want accountability here. I want people in jail for all the crimes that they've committed. We're talking about money laundering, we're talking about tax evasion, we're talking about violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. The list goes on and on and on. And the question is that we've got to decide, Jim Jordan, myself, the House leadership, Scalise, Johnson, what's the best way to provide accountability for the wrongdoing the Biden family's committed?
So you're talking about criminal referrals, and Tony Bobulinski came right out in his statement opening up and saying on page 48 of his transcript, the Hunter Biden transcript, he said he's never interacted with any of his business associates. This is a question. Is that correct? Bobulinski then said Hunter arranged the meeting between his father and me, meaning Bobulinski, at the Beverly Hilton in Los Angeles on May 2nd, 2017. So that means that it appears Hunter Biden has at least committed perjury on that one instance, right?
Look, it looks like Hunter Biden committed perjury many times. Jim Biden definitely committed perjury many times in his transcribed interview. So that's more problems the Bidens had. As if Jim Biden and Hunter Biden didn't have enough problems already, they have more problems in the form of perjury. That's why Hunter Biden needed to be there. That's why he needed to be able to defend himself, because there's discrepancies. And the discrepancies based on the evidence, the text message and the emails, the discrepancies suggest that Bob Lindsey, Galanis, and Devin Archer are telling the truth. The evidence suggests that Hunter Biden is not telling the truth. That's why at the end of the hearing I said, look, if Hunter Biden's not going to show up, then we're going to have to hear from Joe Biden. We will hear from one of the Bidens because they're going to have to answer these discrepancies, or we're going to go with what the evidence shows. The evidence shows that Bob Lindsey, Galanis, and Archer were telling the truth.
Chairman Jamie Comer, Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, on your impeachment inquiry continuing. More evidence apparently ferreted out in this hearing with Tony Bobulinski and Jason Galanis. Sir, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yes,
appreciate it,
good to
Don.
catch up with you.
Thank you.
And to see the entire interview with Representative Comer, watch Weekly Briefing with John Hines this Saturday or Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, right here on One America News. And still to come on OAN, Tim Scott is sending save the dates for his future wedding, how he's taking election season into account, and a former World War II radio man who survived the attack on Pearl Harbor has sadly passed away. The legacy of Richard C. Higgins after the break. Welcome back to One America News. I'm Lindsey Adams. One of the last remaining survivors of the World War II attack on Pearl Harbor has passed away. And this week, the family of Richard C. Higgins confirmed he died of natural causes while at his home in Bend, Oregon. Higgins was a radio man to a patrol squadron of seaplanes that were assigned to the naval base in Oahu, Hawaii, when planes from Japan launched their attack in 1941. He made subsequent media appearances after the end of the war, where he would give first-hand accounts of what he witnessed during the assault. Meantime, a public memorial service set to take place on March 28th. Higgins was a 102 years old. Our prayers go out to him. Well, the National Labor Relations Board accuses Elon Musk's SpaceX of engaging in unfair labor practices. On Thursday, the NLRB accused SpaceX of requiring separated employees to sign severance agreements with clauses of confidentiality and non-disparagement. The board says this violates U.S. labor law. It's looking to repeal the severance agreements and keep SpaceX from enforcing ones that have already been signed. The stock market continues to ride high on the Federal Reserve's recent comments regarding interest rate cuts. Alex Cohen brings us the latest now from Wall Street.
Wall Street's three major stock indexes on Thursday registered record closing highs for the second day in a row after the Federal Reserve reassured investors about the prospects for rate cuts this year. The Dow climbed nearly 0.7%, the S&P 500 rose 0.3%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq added 0.2%. Chip stocks rallied after Micron Technology posted a surprise quarterly profit and said it expects revenue in the current quarter to top estimates. The stock jumped 14% and hit an all-time high during the session. Penn Mutual Asset Management portfolio manager George Cipollone says it's another example of artificial intelligence boosting the market.
Micron's in an area in memory that's really been a strong laggard over the past year and a half. And one of the things they cited was this new form of memory, HBM, that NVIDIA CEO said is vital to AI. And obviously that stock just ripped and just made a new all-time high. And so that's the environment that we are in. The market wants growth. It's getting it from this one major subsector, and it's becoming bigger and bigger.
Other stocks on the move included Apple, which dropped 4% after the U.S. Department of Justice sued the iPhone maker, the first major antitrust effort against the company by the Biden administration, alleging it monopolized smartphone markets. And Reddit, shares of the social media platform soared on their first day of trading, closing 48% above the $34 IPO price.
Well, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott announces his wedding date, and Scott's office told The Hill on Thursday that he and his fiancée, Mindy Noss, are getting married in early August between the RNC convention and Election Day. The Trump surrogate announced his engagement in January after dating Noss for about a year. Scott says he met Noss at his church and adds he's excited to grow with his soulmate. Well, memory chip maker Micron reports record highs as officials forecast a stronger demand for AI-related hardware. Lisa Bernhardt has more.
Shares of Micron Technology surged to a record high on Thursday after the memory chip maker gave a strong revenue forecast due to robust demand for its artificial intelligence-related hardware. The company, which supplies chips to AI darling NVIDIA, said in its earnings report a day earlier that its high-bandwidth memory, or HBM chips, which are used in the development of AI applications, were sold out for 2024. It added that the majority of its 2025 supply has also been allocated. Micron shares have surged more than 60% in the past 12 months. Thursday's stock gain put the chipmaker on track to add nearly $16 billion to its market value, which is over $100 billion. Micron reports earnings ahead of its peers, and in doing so serves as a gauge for broader semiconductor demand. Shares of other chip makers, including Broadcom, Marvell Technology, and Skyworks Solutions, also rose, with the broader Philadelphia Semiconductor Index gaining more than 3% in Thursday morning trading.
1, 2, 3.
And be ready.
Well, Star Wars begins the march toward May the 4th, and on Thursday, Anakin Skywalker himself, Hayden Christensen, helped kick off a Star Wars-themed takeover of the Empire State Building. Actors in Darth Vader and Stormtroopers, they joined the christening as well. And from the ground floor to the observatory deck, Star Wars toy displays, statues, and immersive fan experiences are set for visitors in the lead up to Star Wars Day. Visitors can take part in the experience through April 29th. And with that, we're out of time for this hour of One American News. Of course, to learn more about our network, you can visit our website at oann.com. Have a great night.